I knew the transmission was blown the second I walked into the conference room. You know that sound an AC unit makes right before the fan blades shear off and destroy the casing? That high-pitched metal-on-metal screech? That was the vibe in room 4B. Sitting at the mahogany table was Brandon, the new VP of Operations. He looked like he was assembled from spare parts found in a dumpster behind a men's warehouse. Too much teeth, too much gel, and a suit that fit him about as well as a tuxedo fits a raccoon. Next to him was Sheila from HR, looking like she'd just swallowed a handful of galvanized washers. "Sit down, Jennifer," Brandon said. He didn't look at me. He was looking at his iPad like it contained the secrets of the universe. Rather than just a spreadsheet, he definitely didn't know how to read. I sat. The chair was one of those ergonomic mesh nightmares that costs $1,000 but feels like sitting on a fishing net. I've spent 11 years in this building. 11 years keeping the digital plumbing of this logistics company from backing up and flooding the boardroom with raw sewage. I built the platform. I patched the leaks. When the server room overheat alarm went off at 3 a.m. on Christmas Eve, I was the one who drove in on black ice to keep the system from melting down into a puddle of expensive silicon slag. "Jennifer," Brandon started, using that tone corporate guys use when they think they're being empathetic but actually sound like a condescending GPS. "We're making some structural changes, pivoting to a more agile framework." Agile? I hate that word. It's corporate speak for "we're cutting the load-bearing beams to save money on lumber." "Cut the crap." "Brandon," I said, my voice sounded scratchy. I felt like I needed a cigarette and I don't even smoke anymore. "Well, not inside. You're firing me. Just say it. Don't dress it up in flowery language. It smells like air freshener sprayed over a dead rat." Sheila gasped. Brandon's smile twitched. "We're eliminating your position, yes. We feel your legacy approach is holding us back from modernization." Legacy approach. That's a nice way of saying you actually know how the machine works, and that scares us. See, I'm not a coder in a hoodie drinking matcha. I'm a mechanic. I treat this network like a '78 Ford truck. It's ugly, it rattles, and it smells like gasoline, but it pulls the load. Brandon wants a Tesla. He doesn't realize he's working in a quarry where a Tesla will snap an axle in 10 feet. "You're done here," Brandon said, sliding a folder across the table. "Effective immediately. We need your badge, your laptop, and the system credentials. All of them today." I looked at the folder. It was thick, probably full of legal jargon written by a lawyer who thinks Python is just a snake. I felt a cold, hard knot form in my stomach. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't fear. It was the specific, burning rage you feel when a customer tells you they fixed the leak with duct tape, and now they're mad the ceiling is caving in. Look, before I tell you how I turned this guy's career into a smoking crater, do me a solid. Hit the subscribe button or the upvote arrow or whatever. It's free, and it helps me buy the cheap whiskey I need to recount this story without punching a wall. Thanks. Now back to the demolition. "Credentials," I repeated. "You want the keys to the kingdom, Brandon? You sure you know how to drive this thing?" "My team is more than capable," he scoffed. "We have consultants coming in on Monday. Just write down the admin passwords and the encryption keys." I leaned back, the mesh chair creaked. "Brandon, have you read my employment contract? The original one? The one I signed with the old man before he died?" Brandon rolled his eyes. "We've reviewed the standard agreements, Jennifer. This is a standard termination. You get 2 weeks severance if you sign the NDA. 2 weeks. 11 years of keeping their freight trucks moving, their billing systems syncing, and their regulators happy, and he offers me 2 weeks. That's not a severance package. That's a tip you leave for a waitress you just insulted." "It's not a standard agreement," I said quietly. "You really should read the specs before you fire up the furnace, Brandon. There's a pressure valve in there you don't know about." "I don't have time for this," he snapped. "Sign the paper, Jennifer. Hand over the credentials, or we walk you out with security and fight your unemployment claim. Your choice." I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the arrogance, the ignorance, the absolute unearned confidence of a man who has never had to clean grease out from under his fingernails. He thought I was just overhead. He thought the system ran on magic and synergy. He didn't know that I am the system. I picked up the pen. It was a cheap Bic. Fitting. "Okay, Brandon," I said, "I'll sign. Remember this moment. Remember I asked you to read the contract. I signed my name. It looked like a jagged scar across the paper. I didn't write down the passwords. I didn't write down the encryption keys. I just signed the termination letter." "Smart choice," Brandon smirked. "Now the credentials. I can't give you those," I said, standing up. "Not legally. Not without the board's signature. It's in the contract you didn't read." "Get out," he hissed. "Security." I walked out of that room. I didn't look back. I felt the vibration in the floorboards, the hum of the servers in the basement. They were running smooth right now. But the mechanic had just been fired. And without the mechanic, the machine starts to wobble. I walked to the elevator, my boots heavy on the carpet. "You want to drive, Brandon?" I whispered to the closing doors. "Hope you know how to handle a blowout at 90 miles an hour. Understand why Brandon just pulled the pin on a grenade he's holding in his teeth? You have to understand what I actually do here, or what I did here. Most people think IT is clean. They picture white rooms, blue lights, and guys in hoodies sipping Red Bull. Bullshit. Real enterprise IT, the kind that runs logistics for a mid-sized shipping fleet, is a boiler room. It's dirty, it's messy, it's plumbing. You've got data pipes running through digital sludge, connections held together by the coding equivalent of baling wire, and legacy software that smells like it's been dead for 3 weeks. I started here 11 years ago. The company was smaller then. The founder, Old Man Miller, was still alive. He wasn't a suit. He was a trucker who got lucky and smart. He had hands like catcher's mitts and smoked cigars that smelled like burning tires. I liked him. One night, about 6 months into my job, the whole system cratered. Database corruption that threatened to wipe out the entire billing history. The previous architect had built a house of cards on a foundation of jello. The executives were panicking, running around like headless chickens. I didn't panic. I went into the server room, which back then was just a glorified closet with a window AC unit, locked the door, and went to work. I spent 36 hours in that room. I slept under a desk on a pile of anti-static bags. I ate vending machine crackers. I rewrote the integration scripts by hand. I manually reconciled the databases. I crawled through the digital crawl space, dragging the system back to the surface. When I came out, smelling like stale sweat and ozone, Old Man Miller was waiting. "Is it fixed?" he asked. "It's running," I said, lighting a cigarette. Back then you could still smoke in the loading dock. But the engine block is cracked. It needs a custodian, someone who knows where the bodies are buried. He looked at me. He nodded. "You're the custodian," he said. A week later, he put a contract in front of me. It wasn't the standard HR boilerplate. He'd had his personal lawyer draft it. "I don't trust these MBA kids," Miller grunted, chewing on his cigar. "They come in, change things they don't understand, and break my trucks. This paper says you're the Key Systems Custodian. It ties your employment to the software licenses and the regulator certs. Basically, if they fire you without a transition plan signed by me or the board, the software licenses revert to a locked state. Compliance gets flagged. The insurance pulls coverage. I read it. It was dense. It was weird. It was brilliant. It's a kill switch," I said. "It's job security," Miller winked. "And it protects my company from idiots." For 10 years, that contract sat in a drawer. I did my job. Miller died 3 years ago. The vultures circled. The private equity ghouls. And finally, Brandon. Brandon didn't know about the night in the server room. He didn't know that the core dispatch system, the heartbeat of the company, was a custom Frankenstein monster that only I knew how to feed. He just saw a middle-aged woman in steel-toed boots. "I wear them because I like them," sue me, who didn't use buzzwords like synergy or blockchain. He started treating me like the janitor. "Jennifer, can you fix the printer?" "Jennifer, the Wi-Fi in the break room is slow." I fixed the printers. I fixed the Wi-Fi. I kept my mouth shut. I greased the gears. But I never forgot the contract. And I kept the system running. Not a single day of downtime in a decade. You know how hard that is? That's like driving a car for 10 years without ever turning off the engine or changing the oil, and still winning the Daytona 500. I did that. And Brandon? He just looked at the dashboard and thought, "Why are we paying a mechanic? The car is moving fine." He had no idea. When I walked out of that building after he fired me, I wasn't just leaving a job. I was leaving a pressurized vessel unattended. I sat in my truck, an actual truck, a beat-up F-150 that I love more than most of my relatives, and looked up at the fourth floor. "You want to cut the overhead, Brandon?" I muttered, turning the key. "Let's see how expensive it gets when the roof collapses." I drove to a dive bar called the Rusty Nail. I ordered a shot and a beer. It was time to wait. The pressure was already building. I could feel it in my knees. Brandon showed up 6 months ago, smelling like expensive cologne and bad decisions. He had a resume full of startup exits and strategic realignments, which basically means he knows how to fire people and cash out before the check bounces. He brought an entourage. 3 guys who all looked like clones of him, just with varying degrees of hair loss. They were consultants. I called them the Three Stooges, but that's an insult to Mo, Larry, and Curly. At least they had a work ethic. The first thing Brandon did was criticize the interface of our dispatch software. "It looks like Windows 95. He sneered during our first meeting. "It looks like that because it's text-based for speed," I explained, trying to keep the grit out of my voice. "The dispatchers need to input commands in milliseconds. They don't need drop shadows and rounded corners. They need torque. We're upgrading the UI," he declared. "Make it pop, make it pop." I wanted to pop him in the jaw. He forced us to layer a glossy, web-based front end over my rock-solid SQL backend. It was like putting a spoiler and neon lights on a bulldozer. It didn't make it faster. It just made it look stupid and overheat the engine. The dispatchers hated it. The latency jumped from 20 ms to 500 ms. In logistics, that half-second is the difference between a truck making a delivery and a truck sitting in a lot burning fuel. I tried to warn him. "Brandon," I said, standing in his office doorway. "The API wrapper is choking the database. We're getting timeouts." "You're just resistant to change, Jennifer," he said, not looking up from his phone. "It's a modern look. Clients love it." "Clients don't see the dispatch screen, Brandon. Only our employees do, and they can't do their jobs. Figure it out," he waved a hand. "That's what we pay you for, or maybe we're paying you too much for too little vision." That was the first threat. Then came the audit. He had his stooges crawl through my documentation. They were looking for dirt. They were looking for a reason to cut me loose so they could bring in their own vendor, some cloud solutions firm that probably gave Brandon a kickback. They found nothing because I'm good. My logs are cleaner than a hospital operating room. My uptime was 99.999%, but they didn't care about performance. They cared about control. They started locking me out of meetings. They started changing passwords without telling me. They started treating the Key Systems Custodian like a squatter they were trying to evict. I remember one afternoon, I found one of the stooges, a kid named Kyle who looked like he was 12, messing with the firewall settings. "What are you doing?" I asked, leaning against the server rack. "Optimizing the port forwarding," Kyle squeaked. "You open that port. You're inviting every Russian botnet from here to Moscow to mine crypto on our payroll server," I said. "Brandon said we need remote access for the new dashboard." "Brandon is an idiot," I said. I reached over and unplugged his laptop. "Don't touch my firewall, Kyle. Go play with your fidget spinner." Kyle ran to tell Daddy. That was the beginning of the end. I got written up for insubordination. Insubordination. I saved the company from a ransomware attack. And I get written up because I hurt Kyle's feelings. I realized then that the writing was on the wall. It was spray painted in neon orange, so I started preparing. I didn't sabotage anything. I'm not a hacker. I'm a professional. I just stopped doing the extra stuff. I stopped manually clearing the cache on the temp drives every Sunday. I stopped answering texts at 9 p.m. when the Asia shipment manifests got stuck. I just did exactly what my job description said, and nothing more, and things started to rattle. Little rattles, a slow report here, a frozen screen there. Brandon didn't notice. He was too busy picking out new carpet for his office, but I heard it, the sound of the bearings wearing out. And I knew that once they fired me, once they removed the custodian, the contract would kick in. And that wouldn't be a rattle, that would be a boom. HR calls it a performance improvement plan. I call it a "we're building a paper trail to fire your ass so you can't sue us" plan. For the last 2 months, Sheila from HR had been dragging me into weekly meetings to discuss my attitude and collaborative deficiencies. "Jennifer," she'd say, pursing her lips like she was tasting spoiled milk, "we need you to document your processes. We need a manual. If you were hit by a bus tomorrow, nobody would know how to run the system." "If I get hit by a bus," I'd say, "I won't care about the system." "That's the attitude we're talking about," she'd scribble on her notepad. They wanted the keys. They wanted the map. They wanted me to write down 11 years of institutional knowledge so they could hand it to a 22-year-old consultant billing $200 an hour, so I played along. I wrote documentation. But I wrote it like a mechanic talks to another mechanic. Check the flux capacitor on the secondary intake valve. That's a joke. Close to reality. I used technical jargon so dense it would have its own gravitational pull. Reindex the SQL shards using a temporal heuristic before purging the transaction logs. It was accurate, technically. But good luck following it if you haven't lived in the code for a decade. But while they were squeezing me, I was doing my own prep. I went home every night to my basement office, which is cleaner and better equipped than their HQ, by the way, and I reread the old man's contract. Clause 14b, identity-based licensing. This was the masterpiece. The core logistics software, the engine of the whole company, was a custom-build license from a vendor called Logi Core. Old man Miller knew the guy who ran Logi Core. They drank whiskey together. The license wasn't issued to the company. It was issued to the company care of the Key Systems Custodian. Me. My digital signature was the token that validated the license every 24 hours. If I was terminated and the transition protocol wasn't filed with Logicore, the system would interpret my absence as a security breach. It assumes the company has been hostilely taken over. It enters safe mode. Safe mode in logistics means nothing moves, no labels print, no trucks dispatch, no invoices send. It's a dead man's switch. I checked the vendor portal. My name was there, glowing in green. Authorized custodian, Jennifer redacted. I printed the screen. I printed the contract. I printed every email where I warned Brandon about the system's fragility. I put them all in a binder at home. I labeled it the "I told you so" folder. The night before the firing, I knew it was coming because Sheila had scheduled a quick sync for 9 a.m. on a Friday, and nothing good happens at 9 a.m. on a Friday. I did one last walkthrough of the server room. I patted the main rack. It hummed warmly under my hand. "Sorry, old girl," I whispered. "They're gonna treat you bad, but don't worry, I'll be back." I didn't insert any bugs. I didn't delete any files. I just made sure my personal email was updated in the Logicore notification settings, because I wanted to see the alerts. I wanted a front row seat to the apocalypse. I went home, drank 2 fingers of rye, and slept like a baby. The next morning, I walked into that conference room knowing exactly where the bodies were buried, because I was the one who dug the graves. Brandon thought he was the executioner. He didn't realize he was the victim in a horror movie he hadn't bothered to watch. I left the office at 10:30 a.m. Security walked me out. Paul, the guard, looked embarrassed. "Sorry, Jen," he mumbled. "Orders." "It's all right, Paul," I said, handing him my badge. "Keep an eye on the thermostat in the lobby. It sticks." I got in my truck. I didn't cry. I felt light. For For the first time in 11 years, the weight of a multi-million-dollar logistics network wasn't sitting on my shoulders. It was sitting on Brandon's, and his shoulders were padded with cheap foam. I went to the Rusty Nail. It's a dive bar that smells like lemon pledge and stale beer. It was empty, except for a couple of retirees nursing draft beers. I ordered a burger and a beer. Celebrating? The bartender Mike asked. Something like that, I said. Just retired. You're too young to retire. Tell that to my blood pressure. I checked my watch. 11 o'clock a.m. The Logi core system performs its handshake at 2 o'clock a.m. That's when it pings the custodian token. If the token me is marked as terminated in the HR feed, which Brandon surely updated immediately to cut off my access, and no transition protocol was uploaded. Well, math is simple, 15 hours until impact. I went home. I took a long shower. I scrubbed the corporate air off my skin. I put on my favorite sweatpants, the ones with the paint stains. I cracked open a beer and sat on my porch. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Sarah in accounting. She was one of the good ones. OMG, Jen, are you gone? Brandon sent an email saying you pursued other opportunities. We're all in shock. I replied, yeah. Opportunities to not deal with Brandon. Good luck, Sarah. It's already weird here, she texted back. The dashboard is acting glitchy. It keeps asking for admin approval for basic reports. It starts. The system senses the disturbance in the force. The permissions are tightening. It's looking for its mother and she's not there. I ignored the text. Not my circus, not my monkeys. I watched the sun go down. I grilled a steak. I fed my dog, Buster. Buster, I said, tomorrow. Mommy is going to be very expensive. Buster wagged his tail. He gets it. I went to bed at 11 p.m. I put my phone on the nightstand, volume up high. I wanted to hear it. I wanted to hear the sound of Brandon's arrogance hitting the wall of reality. 2 o'clock a.m. came. I was awake, staring at the ceiling fan. 2:01 a.m., 2:02 a.m. Bing. My personal email. Subject, Logi Core Security Alert Critical. Body, Primary Custodian Token Invalid. Transition Protocol Not Detect. System State, Lockdown Pending. Compliance Breach Code 7734. 7734 is hell upside down on a calculator. Old Man Miller had a sense of humor. I smiled. A mean, toothy smile in the dark. The kill switch had flipped. The software had just realized Daddy was dead and Mommy had been kicked out, and it was locking the doors and calling the cops. I rolled over and went back to sleep. The next morning was going to be glorious. I woke up to 47 missed calls, 12 from Brandon, 6 from Sheila in HR, 3 from the CEO who I've spoken to maybe twice in 5 years, and about 20 from various terrified employees. I made coffee. I drank it slowly, standing by the window. It was Saturday. Saturdays are big shipping days. The fleet runs 24/7, or it usually does. I checked the vendor alerts on my iPad. System status, locked. Active dispatches, 0. Pending manifests, 4,500. Compliance flags, 12. Holy hell, it was worse than I thought. See, when Logi Core locks down, it doesn't just stop new orders. It freezes the current ones. Digital manifests, the legal documents that allow a truck to carry freight across state lines, were revoked. Drivers were likely sitting at weigh stations, getting fined because their tablets were showing unauthorized. Warehouse gates wouldn't open because the inventory system couldn't verify the load. The entire company was a convulsing, paralyzed beast. My phone rang again. Brandon Mobile. I let it ring. It rang again. I picked it up but didn't say anything. I just listened. Jennifer, Jennifer, pick up the damn phone. He sounded panicked. Gone was the smooth, corporate baritone. Sounded like a teenager who just crashed his dad's Porsche. Jennifer, we know you did something. The system is down. Everything is down. Undo it. I took a sip of coffee. Good morning, Brandon. Who is this? It's Brandon. Stop playing games. Logs are showing a security lockdown. What is the password? I don't know, I said calmly. I don't work there. I believe I was terminated for my legacy approach. Jennifer, listen to me. We are losing $50,000 an hour. The trucks are stuck. The clients are screaming. Sounds like a modernization problem, I said. Have you tried making the UI pop? I will sue you, he screamed. I will have the FBI at your door. Go ahead, I said. Call them. Ask them to read the contract. Specifically Clause 14B, the one I told you to read, the one you said you reviewed. There was a silence on the line, a heavy, suffocating silence. What clause? He whispered. One that says I'm the Key Systems Custodian, and that if you fire me without a board resolution, the software assumes you're a hostile actor and shuts down to protect the data. It's a feature, Brandon, not a bug. He hung up. I laughed. It was a dry, rusty sound. He was reading it now. He was scrambling through that folder, sweating through his cheap suit, finding page 14. And he was realizing that he hadn't just fired an IT manager. He had fired the ignition key. An hour later, the CEO called. Jennifer, he said. His voice was grim. Mr. Henderson, I said, we have a situation. I heard. Brandon seems to be having trouble with the Agile framework. Jennifer, the bank just called. Our compliance certs are offline. They're threatening to freeze our operating line of credit. The DOT is flagging our fleet numbers. That sounds serious. It is. We need you to come in. Now, I'm fired, Mr. Henderson. I don't have a badge. We'll reinstate you. Full back pay. Just come fix it. No, I said. Excuse me? I said no. I don't want my job back. You guys made it very clear I wasn't a good fit. Jennifer, name your price, now we're talking. I'm not an employee anymore, Mr. Henderson, I'm a consultant. And my rates are aggressive. Fine, whatever, just come in. I'll need a contract, I said, and I need Brandon to be there. In the room, he's here, good. Tell him to get the coffee ready. I like it black, I didn't rush. I finished my coffee. I took Buster for a walk. I put on a clean flannel shirt, my formal flannel, and my best boots. I drove to the office around 11 o'clock a.m. The parking lot was a mess. Trucks were backed up onto the street. Drivers were standing around smoking, looking pissed. I pulled into my old spot. Someone had already scraped my name off the sign. I parked there anyway. I walked into the lobby. Paul the guard was there, looking relieved. They're waiting for you upstairs, Jen. It's a madhouse. I swiped my badge. It didn't work. Obviously, buzz me up, Paul. He buzzed me in. The fourth floor sounded like a stock exchange floor during a crash, people shouting, phones ringing constantly. The smell of fierce sweat was palpable. I walked to the boardroom. They were all there. The CEO, the CFO, the board chair, and Brandon. Brandon looked terrible. His tie was undone. His hair was messy. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 hours. Sheila from HR was sitting in the corner, looking like she wanted to melt into the carpet. Jennifer, the CEO said, standing up. Thank God, that's Miss Miller to you now, I said, sitting at the head of the table. I kicked my boots up onto the mahogany. I'm an outside contractor. Fine, Miss Miller. Can you unlock the system? Yes, I said. I have the token. It's on my keychain. I pulled out a small USB drive. But before I plug this in, we need to sign some paperwork. I slid a document across the table. I had typed it up before I left the house. It was one page, simple, brutal. Consulting agreement 1, role, senior systems architect external. 2, rate $400 per hour, minimum 40 hours, billed weekly. 3, retainer $50,000 upfront, non-refundable. 4, reporting direct to the board of directors. No reporting line to the VP of operations. 5, clause 5, a formal written apology from the VP of operations entered into the permanent company record. The CEO read it, his face turned red. This is extortion, Brandon sputtered. You caused this. I looked at Brandon. I didn't cause anything. You fired the custodian. The building locked itself. That's security, Brandon. You should appreciate it. I turned to the CEO. Every minute we talk. Another truck gets flagged by the DOT. How much is that costing you? More than 50 grand? The CFO punched some numbers on his calculator. He looked at the CEO and nodded, pay her. The CEO signed the check. He signed the contract. Brandon, the CEO said, sign the apology. I won't, Brandon said. This is ridiculous. Sign it, the board chair boomed, or you're fired for cause, negligence, failure to review critical contracts. Brandon's hand shook. He picked up the pen. I watched him sign. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. Great, I said, pocketing the check. Now let's go to the server room. I walked down the hall, the executives trailing behind me like ducklings. Brandon walked at the back, head down. I stopped at the server room door. Wait here, I said, only authorized personnel. I went inside. The room was cool and loud with fan noise. The red lights were blinking on the rack, system lock. I plugged in my USB key. I typed in my credentials, identity verified, Key Systems Custodian active, transition protocol omitted, override authorized, restoring system state, 3, 2, 1. The red lights turned green. The hum changed pitch. It went from a jagged whine to a smooth, deep purr. I heard the phones outside stop ringing for a second, then start ringing again with relief. The beast was awake. The engine was running. I walked out. It's fixed, I said. I'll be in my office, my home office. I bill for travel time, by the way. The next week was a blur of invoices and satisfaction. I work from home. I set up my laptop on my deck. I drank coffee that didn't taste like despair. And I billed them. Oh, I billed them. I billed them for the login time. I billed them for the system stabilization, which was mostly me just watching the logs. I billed them for strategic consultation. First check cleared on Tuesday. My mortgage is looking a lot less scary. Brandon was still there, technically, but he was a ghost. The board had stripped him of all IT oversight. He was now just in charge of physical facilities, which meant he was the glorious leader of the janitors and the parking lot. I had a Zoom call with the team on Wednesday. Brandon was on the call, looking sullen. Okay, team, I said, my voice coming through their speakers with the authority of God. Rolling back the UI changes. All of them. We're going back to the command line interface. But the aesthetics, Brandon muttered. Brandon, I said, you're on mute. And even if you weren't, you don't have a vote. Go fix the leak in the second floor men's room. The team stifled laughs. He turned his camera off. I dug into the system. I realized that during the upgrade, the Stooges had left so many security holes you could drive a semi through them. I spent the week patching them up. I wrote a report to the board. Subject, security audit and remediation. Findings, previous management, VP operations, introduced critical vulnerabilities due to negligence and lack of technical understanding. Recommendation, permanent removal of VP operations from all technical decision-making loops. The board accepted the recommendation immediately. They were terrified of me. They knew I held the license key, knew that if I walked, the software locked again. I had become the thing Old Man Miller intended, the custodian. But now I wasn't just a custodian, I was the landlord and they were just renting space. I went into the office on Friday to pick up some personal items I'd missed. People looked at me differently. No more IT lady. Now it was Miss Miller. I walked past Brandon's office. He was yelling at a vendor about carpet swatches. He saw me. He stopped yelling. He looked small. I didn't say anything. I just tapped the folder under my arm, the one with the contract, and kept walking. He knew he was done. He was just waiting for the final paperwork. And honestly, I didn't even care enough to fire him. Watching him rot in middle management purgatory, terrified of a woman in flannel, was way more satisfying. It's been 3 months since the meltdown. The company is running better than ever. The trucks are on time. Dispatchers are happy because I gave them back their ugly, fast black and green screens. I visit the office once a week. I wear jeans. I leave at 2 p.m. Nobody says a word. Brandon resigned last week to pursue other opportunities. I heard he got a job at a startup selling NFT-based supply chain solutions. Good luck to them. He's their problem now. The board asked me to stay on permanently as the CIO. I told them no. I like being a consultant, like the hourly rate, and I like knowing that I can walk away anytime I want and they have to beg me to stay. I did agree to train a successor, though, a young kid named Marcus, smart kid. He knows Python, but he also knows how to use a screwdriver. I'm teaching him the ropes. I'm teaching him that the cloud is just someone else's computer and that fancy UIs don't move freight. And I'm teaching him to read the contracts. I'm sitting in my garage right now. It's Friday night. I've got a cold beer, Miller High Life, obviously, and I'm tinkering with an old server blade I bought on eBay. I like taking things apart. I like seeing how they work. And I like knowing that sometimes the most important part of the machine isn't the shiny casing or the loud exhaust. It's the nut that holds the wheel on. Brandon tried to strip the nut, and he learned what happens when the wheels come off. So, here's the lesson, folks. Whether you're running a server farm for a logistics giant, don't mess with the mechanic. Don't ignore the weird noises in the engine. And for the love of God, read the damn contract, because there might be a clause in there that turns your termination meeting into a hostage situation. I'm gonna finish this beer. The dog needs a walk, and I've got a billable hour to log for mental health maintenance. Stay greasy, Reddit, Jennifer out. And seriously, hit the upvote button. The retainer pays the bills, but the karma warms my cold, cynical heart. Appreciate you sticking around, you legends of the break room. Subscribe for more chaos. Let's make your old managers spill their coffee in fear.